These days, the new MacBook Pros are quite justifiably the talk of the town. But in today's video, I want to go back in time, to set aside the new and the shiny, and to take a look at where it all began. And that means taking a look at this, the original MacBook Pro. This particular one has only been taken out of its box one time in the past 14 years. And that was by me about a year ago. So check that video out if you missed it. So in today's video, we're gonna be taking a look at this pristine time capsule MacBook Pro, and I think you'll find it has a lot more in common with the new ones than you might think. So get subscribed and let's get into it. Oh, hey. I almost didn't notice you because I'm so comfortable thanks to today's video sponsor, Autonomous. The Ergo Chair Pro by Autonomous is the perfect companion for your work and play. Ergo Chair Pro features numerous adjustments for superior comfort. You can adjust everything from the lumbar to the angle of recline, the amount of tension, the headrest height, the arm position, and the height of the chair. The bottom cushion is super plush and supportive, and the backrest is made from a woven mesh that's very breathable and easy to use on a day-to-day basis. And now with Black Friday coming up right around the corner, you won't want to miss the deals going on over at autonomous.ai. When you shop with my coupon code for orders over $1,500, you'll get a free LED desk lamp or monitor arm. And for orders under $1,500, you'll get 4% off any non-discounted full price items in your cart. And I gotta tell you guys, the Ergo Chair Pro is well worth it. I've been using one for several months now, and it is easily my favorite office chair and well worth the price. Head over to the link in the description below and use coupon code 21BFLucmiani to get your free product with your order. These gifts usually run out pretty fast, so head over to autonomous.ai today. And now, back to the video. So the similarities between this original MacBook Pro and our brand new M1 Pro and M1 Max MacBooks today is that this was the start of a transition. This MacBook Pro was one of the first products that received Intel processors back in 2006.
But there is one more thing that I want to talk about.
But this specific MacBook Pro is probably the nicest and most well-preserved example that you can find out there. This, as you can even already tell from the box, has barely been used. I even have its original shipping box with a ship date from 2008, August 19th. So let's start with the unboxing experience. This MacBook Pro unboxing is a little bit different than what we are used to now. I mean, for one, this opening mechanism, one of the big things that you'll notice straight away is that Apple no longer uses styrofoam in their packaging, although I have to say, this is pretty cool, and the holes on the front kind of remind me of the Cheese Grater Mac Pro a little bit. We also have the MacBook Pro emblem embossed here on the bottom, which kind of reminds me of the underside of the new MacBook Pros. Very interesting. Removing that, here we have the contents of the box. Now, straight away, this MacBook included a dongle. We have a DVI to VGA adapter. That makes sense, we're talking about the mid-2000s here. VGA was very common, but obviously today I don't think Apple would be shipping you a dongle anytime soon. We also have our look here at the first generation MagSafe.
We call this new feature MagSafe. And if when the cord gets yanked, it just pulls right off. It works beautifully.
And wow, this is really well preserved. It's not very often that you get to see the white plastic T-tip MagSafe chargers with the original cap completely unused. You can also see that we have the old style wall adapter that has this rather ugly plug on the end. So that's another relic of the past. And also another thing that you don't get in the box anymore. So let's go ahead and take out the MacBook Pro. Now, underneath it, you can see we have some familiar looking documentation, although there is significantly more of it than you get nowadays. Look how thick this booklet is. If we go ahead and open that up, you'll notice that we get a significant user manual. This has pretty much everything that you might want to do on your new MacBook Pro. But one thing that I think is really interesting that you certainly would not see anymore is a diagram on how to upgrade the RAM. Look at that. If that isn't a relic from the past, I don't know what is. Let's see if we have a microfiber cloth. Yes. Once again, Apple charges you an extra 20 bucks for this thing now. So wow, look at that. Value proposition has decreased substantially. So that is the unboxing experience from 2006. What do you guys think? Is this better or worse than it is now? One thing that you can't deny that is super handy is this carrying handle right up on top. Look at that. And you also get this canvas bag that the MacBook actually comes in. So let's go ahead and take the MacBook out of this bag and examine it side by side with the new generation. Look at that. What a beauty. I mean, it is not every day that you get to sit here and look at an absolutely perfect, factory fresh, brand new MacBook Pro. Now, yes, I did have to remove the battery because when I first unboxed this last year, it had swollen with age. So I took that out to prevent any damage, but apart from that, this is probably one of the only pristine MacBooks still in existence this long after it was manufactured. So let's bring in the new MacBook here for comparison. Wow. Okay, that's actually striking how similar those are. They are almost exactly the same width. And let's see if I put this on top of the other one. Wow. Okay, the new MacBook Pro is maybe a little bit taller. Wow, these look so similar. Even the Apple logos look like they're the same size. Now, obviously, the old MacBook Pro is thicker, pretty noticeably. That's one area where the old MacBook Pro is different because when Apple unveiled this thing, it was, at the time, their thinnest MacBook Pro ever.
The new MacBook Pro is the fastest Mac notebook ever, obviously. It's also the thinnest. It's an inch thin, and it's even a hair thinner than the 17-inch PowerBook.
That is not the case with the new generation, because for the past 2 or 3 years, Apple products have actually been getting thicker. And I think that's a good thing, personally. Back in the Jobs era, all the way up through the 2010s, it seemed like we were in a race to make things as thin as possible, but there were sacrifices that came with that. I'm looking at you, glued-in batteries, butterfly keyboards, and overheating MacBooks. But now that we've gone back in time a decade and a half to this more squared-off, boxy design, I think there are some benefits that have come with it, especially in terms of cooling and thermal performance. But ironically, the cooling benefits don't harken back to this generation of MacBook Pro, because this MacBook Pro, as thick as it is, as beefy as it looks, was really, really bad in terms of cooling. Turning them both upside down here, you can see what I'm talking about. It might be subtle, but if you look on the new MacBook Pro, you'll notice that we have these gills along the side. These vents were first introduced back in 2012 with the Retina MacBook Pro. And the idea is that air can get sucked in here, go through the fans, and exhaust out the back. On the old MacBook Pro, that simply wasn't the case. We don't have any gills along the side here or any openings around the device except for right here underneath the hinge. So that means that all of the air intake and exhaust has to come through this same area. There's no space above the display like on the new MacBook Pro, and as such, these things kind of become little furnaces. And that's why 3 out of the 4 different revisions for this first generation MacBook Pro were plagued with reliability issues. Under the hood here, the differences are apparent. So clearly Apple has taken some design cues from the exterior of the old MacBook Pro, but I don't think the same could be said of the interior. Another thing that hasn't changed is the sound effects that are bundled with Apple software. I've got Final Cut Pro open over here. I've got iMovie 2008 open over here. Both of them have my all-time favorite, 44th Street Long. Okay, I will admit, the speakers have improved substantially in the last 15 years. If we look at the displays here, obviously quite a bit has changed. We're looking at a 1440 by 900 15.4-inch LCD display. Over here, we have, honestly, the cream of the crop. 3K, ProMotion, Mini LED, HDR, this is the works. But it's important to remember that back when this MacBook came out, its display was the best of the best too. I mean, this is 2008 and Apple was using IPS panels. The viewing angles on this MacBook Pro are really, really impressive if you remember back to the typical PC laptop of 2008 that had about 2 degrees where the colors looked okay, and then if you moved the lid at all, they shifted with wild abandon. So it's good to see Apple is back leading the pack with what I think is the best display in any laptop right now overall. One thing the display on this MacBook is that the new one is perfectly rectangular. There's obviously no notch here, but nonetheless, the camera on both of these MacBooks is significant. On the new MacBooks, we have the controversial notch, which houses a 1080p webcam. On the old MacBook Pro, this was actually the first MacBook that shipped with a webcam to begin with. And that might not sound like a big deal now, but in 2006, it was.
It's got an eyesight camera built in. Where's Phil, I wonder? There he is.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Phil. How you doing?
Pretty good. I'm out here in the audience. I got a brand new MacBook Pro with its built-in eyesight camera. I can have so much fun. Watch this. Woo! The world does revolve around me.
Arguably a bigger deal on both of these MacBooks is what's inside of them, because while they may be 15 years apart, under the hood, they share a common thread, and that is revolutionary technology. And one thing that stands out to me is the focus on performance per watt. This is something that we've heard a lot about now, but was actually all along one of Apple's main focuses.
One of the things we said when we were switching to Intel was it wasn't just about performance, it was about performance per watt. But the Core Duo was designed for this from the start. Look at that. And so it is 4 times better than the G4 and 4.5 times better than the G5.
It's kind of eerie to hear Steve Jobs making the same arguments back in 2006 that Apple Silicon is making now.
At their peak, they deliver 1.7 times the performance of the PC chip in the same power envelope.
I love taking a look back in time, taking a look at the original MacBook versus the new MacBook, because what's really interesting to me is that there are a lot of similarities between these devices, but at the same time, they're very, very different. So you can't really say that the new MacBook is a throwback, an homage to the original, because there's many things that have been learned from and improved upon from this original generation. But at the same time, you can definitely see Apple nodding back to their roots. This design that dates all the way back to the PowerBook G4, from 2003. And I think it's kind of nice to be able to look back in time and say, hey, that's familiar. I recognize that. I'm very curious to know what you guys think of the comparisons. What similarities and differences stand out to you when comparing the new MacBooks with their ancient ancestors from 2006? And what other vintage or outdated Apple products do you want me to take a look at? Let me know in the comments below. As usual, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.